Hi, I'm Rose. So I work in cross-categorical pre-K, so all of my assignments that I've done thus far for the program, I've answered as it relates to pre-K, and done some more research to make sure that I understand it as it relates to pre-K, because things work very differently in the pre-K realm. So that's how I'm going to be answering these questions here for the sake of this video. In terms of the co-teaching service delivery model and how it serves students with disabilities in the general education classroom, we have we have one co-teaching and one collaborative model in the pre-K setting. And our co-teaching model is basically where we are in a Georgia pre-K classroom, and it is specifically Georgia pre-K. These are not typically private pre-Ks, they're public pre-K programs out in the community. And the classroom is a typical general education pre-K size, so that's usually between 18 and 20 to 22 students per classroom, with one adult and one para. But in addition to the one adult and one para in our co-teaching models, there's also a certified special education teacher inside this classroom. And out of the 18 to 20 or 22 students that are in the classroom, 6 of those students have IEPs. Now, the beauty of being in a co-teaching classroom is that the students don't know which students have an IEP when it's done properly, which I think is absolutely amazing, because there's no singling out of any of the students. They just know that there's another adult in the classroom working with the kids. So while the special education teacher's primary goal or primary concern is working with the students with an IEP, that teacher will also work with the students who don't have an IEP, which I think is absolutely amazing. I think that kind of blurs the line a little bit more on who has a disability in the classroom and who doesn't, and I think that's really great when it comes to inclusion. Just kind of having everybody meshed in there together where everyone's needs are still being met. Explain how the co-teaching service option can be viewed as the least restrictive environments for students with disabilities. So I work on this a lot. I'm always assessing whether or not my classroom is actually the least restrictive environment for my kids. I was lucky enough this year to have 10 kids move from my classroom into a general education setting, and that looked different for all 10 kids. Some kids went into the co-teaching model and other kids went into a collaborative model. And one student is actually moving into IRR for kindergarten, which is absolutely amazing. But basically what I do for this is I check their IEP goals and objectives. I'm constantly taking data on them, and I'm reviewing that data and comparing it to how they function in my classroom to see if the classroom that they are currently being served in, aka mine, is too restrictive for them. And what that means is, are there too many supports being offered to this student? And it inhibits their ability to progress any further. So for a lot of my kids this year, we looked at their social skills, and that's really kind of what drove whether or not it was we were continuing in a least restrictive environment. And for the 10 kiddos that I moved out, it was determined that my classroom was too restrictive, meaning they had too many supports and they were ready for some more independence. Now on the other end, so I guess I kind of switched those questions around. That was for like, how can my classroom be considered restrictive, and we know when they need to go into a least restrictive environment. We know the student is in the least restrictive environment when the student has the minimal amount of supports needed to succeed. Right, so if my classroom is too restrictive, we're going to go up a level, and from there would be the co-teaching model, which would give them a little more support, but also a little bit more independence. And eventually we'll come to a point where the student no longer needs, I think it's like 37 and a half hours of support a week in a co-teaching environment. And so if we come to the point where the student no longer needs 37.5 hours of support a week from a special education teacher, we'll go into a collaborative setting, which means that they have even more independence and are doing great. Sometimes, I will say sometimes we have made that jump from a cross-categorical classroom, which is me, small group, self-contained, to a collaborative classroom. I think I did that with 2 kids this year, but those 2 kids were both students that had been in my classroom for a while and really made a lot of progress in this last 6 months of school, and were just absolutely excelling to the point where I was almost 100% hands-off with them at the end of the school year, which is how we determined, after I reviewed the data, then I had people from the county come out and review the data too. So it is a lengthy process to make sure that the student is getting the correct amount of supports, and there's lots of people reviewing the data, which I think is absolutely amazing to have more than one set of eyes on it. But that's just another way that we determine which setting is appropriate for the kids. But it was determined that the collaborative teaching setting was appropriate based on their level of need in my classroom and their level of functioning in my classroom as well.